Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Building the Next Generation Learning Technology Ecosystem. I'm Dave Wentworth. I am the Principal Learning Analyst here at Brandon Hall Group, and I'll be kicking things off for us today. To get started, I would like to extend a thank you to ELB Learning for sponsoring today's webinar. ELB Learning is a one-stop shop for creating and delivering better learning experiences. They offer the most comprehensive suite of products and services to help conquer your training challenges. Their products include tools for building learning games, virtual reality training, e-learning courses, and video-based practice, as well as an LXP and LMS. They also offer learning strategy services, custom learning development, and staff augmentation. And for those of you who are not familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we are a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. Quick mention that we currently have several certification programs open for enrollment, including our Certified Learning Strategist program. Visit certification.brandonhall.com to learn more about how to earn that designation. I always like to bring up that your participation in our surveys is one of the most crucial components of our research. So if you have a few minutes to spare and see any topics on this next slide that are of interest to you, you could take that survey. It's greatly appreciated. Links will be available in the handout. You can always visit brandonhall.com, and all participants in our studies receive a piece of complimentary research once we've finished analyzing the results. Now for some logistics. The presentation is being recorded, so the playback will be provided to everyone within 24 hours of the webinar in a follow-up email. If you'd like to download a copy of the presentation now, you can find it in the handout section and download it right away. And if you'd like to ask a question, which we strongly encourage, please do so by typing it into the question box. And that's something that all of our presenters will be keeping an eye on today, and we'll try to answer relevant questions in real time, try to have some time at the end as well to catch up with any questions we may have missed. So that's the way you're going to communicate with us. And so what I would like to do now is introduce the dream team that we've assembled. As I gave you the sort of the background on ELB learning, they cover such a wide array of learning technologies and areas that these guys seem to be the perfect fit for talking about the learning technology ecosystem and everything that goes into it. So obviously I want to start off with Jeff Curlis, who's the Senior Vice President of Sales for Learning Solutions at ELB Learning. Jeff oversees the sales of learning solutions for ELB Learning, and prior to ELB Learning, through an acquisition, he led sales and customer success for Rehearsal. And he's seen as a foremost expert on video-based practice and coaching technologies. We're also joined by Stephen Baer, who's the Chief Creative Officer for ELB Learning. He's the Managing Partner and Head of Creative at the Game Agency, a division of ELB Learning. Stephen oversees the creative strategy and execution for campaign rollouts, and previously, Stephen was the Director of Brand Integration at Atari, where he oversaw development and marketing for all branded games. And finally, John Blackman, who is the Chief Technology Officer of ELB Learning. And as the Chief Technology Officer, John is responsible for all aspects of e-learning development. Prior to joining eLearning Brothers, John was co-founder and CEO of Trivantis, where he created the flagship products, Lectora and Scenario VR. So this is why we brought these gentlemen here today to talk about the learning technology ecosystem. I think we've got it well covered. So I encourage you to ask questions throughout, but right now I'd like to turn it over to Jeff and go ahead and get us started.
Appreciate that, David. Thank you very much. As David mentioned, my name is Jeff Curlis, and I'm going to be the initial host of the session today. So really appreciate you all taking time out of your days to join us to learn a little bit about our thoughts and our opinions and our backstory around the learning ecosystem. And so our plan for today, what I want to start off with, is just give you an idea of what we want to cover for you all today. And first, we're going to explore the learning ecosystem as a vendor. And as David mentioned, ELB Learning, formerly eLearning Brothers, has been in the e-learning and online training space for quite a while. And more recently has been acquiring companies. And so we begin to really get an interesting vision of what we see as the upcoming learning ecosystem and what all that means. So we'll cover that from a vendor's perspective, which I think is an interesting perspective. We're going to review where and why we have invested the money that we have as an acquisition company. And interestingly enough, it's not just in the technology or the product itself, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but an ecosystem takes on a whole heck of a lot of things, technology being one of them, but we're also seeing ourselves investing in other areas as well that we'll talk about. And lastly, we're going to dive into 3 key technologies that we think best show and best enhance the next generation learning technology ecosystem, as I say that phrase. And what I mean by that is, want to just kind of give you some examples as a company that serves this market as to where we've invested our money and the types of products that have been interesting to us as we look out into the future about what this all means, and sharing that should hopefully give you some ideas as to what we see as valuable and why it's driving our company the way that we're moving. So from the eyes of a vendor, why do I think that that's an important kind of angle to look at this from? We work with thousands of different companies. Again, eLearning Brothers started in this space 12 years ago. In 2020, just before the pandemic started to hit, we began to acquire companies. We've acquired now 6 companies over the last 2 years. So we have basically started to take our own money and invest it into this future technology ecosystem, specifically around the learning space. We've recently rebranded to ELB Learning to take on that broader mission. We're no longer just an e-learning focused organization, but really a learning organization. At the end of the day, we're here to help organizations create better learning experiences. And so from a vendor perspective, again, if we think about it, we serve thousands of customers and they come to us and they're trying to figure out where they should invest their time and effort and what they should be doing as they start to build out their own learning ecosystem. And through all of that experience, we've come up with some ideas, some things that have worked for us and things that have worked for those customers. And we're going to share those with you all today. All right, let's go to the next slide. So first, what is a learning technology ecosystem? And again, when I first started to think about how we wanted to present this, I was thinking about this as being really a technology conversation, but there's a lot more to an ecosystem than just that. It's a network of content and data and people and process and technology all coming together to support the learning infrastructure of an organization. That's our opinion of a technology ecosystem. And I say that because today is going to be a lot of opinions, because you'll go out there and you'll talk with a lot of people that may define a technology ecosystem slightly differently. But in a nutshell, it's all of it coming together in aggregate to serve the learning infrastructure for that organization. So content, data, people, process, and technology. Now, from a vendor perspective, there are some things that we don't necessarily get heavily involved in, but what we do get heavily involved in when we work with customers is the people aspect of things and the technology aspect of things. So that's where you'll see a lot of our focus today. Oftentimes the content can be very company specific. The data and what to do with it becomes very company specific. The processes can even be company specific. But from our angle, we deal heavily in the people aspect and the technology aspect. So we'll talk about that a lot today in this session. Let's look firstly at some industry trends. And when I take a look at this, understand the reason I want to share some of these statistics is that when we start to move into why we're doing what we're doing as kind of a vendor in the space, why we're investing in the types of acquisitions that we are, it's really driven by the trends in the industry statistics that are coming our way. Recently, LinkedIn Learning did a 2022 workplace learning report that had some really interesting statistics, and we want to talk a little bit about that. I think a lot of people are seeing this, and as we have conversations all the time, we're hearing it more and more. 81% of executives are changing their workforce policies, flexibility for their workforce. That's all an L&D result. I mean, it's ultimately resulting in changes to learning and development in addition to just the talent management aspect of things. And so it's pretty heavy to see that number of folks really focusing on how their future workplace is going to be different. Secondly, percent of L&G professionals who agree that now L&D has a seat at the table. 2 years ago, it was only a quarter of the folks that were saying yes to that. Now over half of folks are saying L&D has a really important spot at the table now because people are becoming front and center at companies. And it's not just about, getting people in, but it's how are we getting them prepared, reskilled, upskilled for these new roles in this new world that we're working in from a remote perspective. So a lot more L&D involvement at the high levels. to that end, more money's flying into this, right? 48% of those responding to that survey said they expect to have more spending power than they have over the last 6 years. So 48% said they will have more spending power, and that's higher than it has been for the last 6 years. And lastly, and something that we'll talk a lot about, is the demand for L&D specialists increased the second half of last year 94% over the first half of that year. And that's an amazing thing to think about. And it all goes back to this idea that with all of these changes happening, L&D is getting a heck of a lot of attention. And more than that, people with L&D skills and professionals need to be able to come in and help organizations make the changes that they need to make. So these, again, impact some of the decisions that we at ELB have made, but impact the decisions that a lot of our customers have made as well. So what have we done over the last 2 years? We've gone out and acquired 6 different companies. We've put our money in a number of different areas, but this wheel over here on the right that we look at ELB Learning really covers the basics in terms of where we see the learning ecosystem play out. And so we see it both from a technology and a products perspective. So we personally, as an organization, have spent money on course authoring, on gamification, on virtual reality, on video practice and coaching, and on learning platforms. So that's one piece of the puzzle, and we'll talk a lot about why these things were interesting to us and why we went down those paths from a technology investment perspective. But the other side of what we do from a services perspective is we've also gone out and invested heavily in learning strategy, custom development services, and staff augmentation. And there's a whole path to why we've done that, but really it's the leading path for our world and what we're trying to do and what we're seeing our customers look at as well. So if you look at kind of how we've seen this market, it's broken down between the people angle and the technology or the products angle, and we'll talk about both of those. So let's first start by the services and the people aspect. So ELB has spent money and invested their time and effort into custom development, staff augmentation, and learning strategy. But here's the main issue that we see. Companies are coming to us more so now than ever before, struggling to get access to the talent that they need to support what they're trying to accomplish. And so as we see here, the demand for L&D specialists spiked in the latter half of 2021. We saw that as well, and our customers saw that also. So much like our customers are going out and trying to find the people, the L&D specialists to support the work that they're trying to do, and all that's coming their way as executives and management is pushing them to take on a whole new focus, they need assets like people to come in and make those changes. So for us, access to people and talent was a huge part of what we've gone out and invested in. So we've done that through acquiring companies that have individuals that are L&D experts that create content and develop strategies for our customers. But bigger than that is a whole new world that we got involved with, which was staff augmentation, which was having access to a database of thousands of L&D professionals to almost serve as a matching service. And the reason that we've done that is because it's becoming so much harder nowadays to find access to that talent, that we wanted to make sure that we as an organization had the access to the individuals that we need and the talent that we need when we needed it. So that's where we spent a lot of our time, and that's where we put a lot of our investment. So one of the things that we would suggest, and we'll get into some of the key takeaways at the end here, but we suggest to all of our customers who are looking at building out their ecosystem, yes, there's the technology piece, but first and foremost is make sure you have a plan in place for the people side of that business. Meaning today you might not need, the access to staff or people or outsourcing opportunities, but make sure you have a plan so that when you do need to hire, need to outsource, need to get access to that talent for short or long term, you have a path and a plan for that. And that plan can be anything: network, interact with a broader audience. Just make sure that you have a path to get to those L&D specialists. And we saw that as a very important investment on our side of things, and our customers are also trying to find how they can build their networks as well. But start with the people and then lean into the technology thereafter. So I think that's an important piece to cover as we talk about what ELB has done to really set the stage to support our growth as we look at adding the technology piece at a later time. Now, we'll move into the product side of our investment as well. So let's follow the invested money from ELB into the products. So we see products as kind of two different levels. The first piece over here on the left, these are the products that we have invested money in over the last 2 years. We look at the LMS and the authoring component as being the foundational technologies that everything else is going to be built off of. So we've invested heavily in that area. And our customers, probably most of you on the call, have also invested in this, making sure you have the data tracking through an LMS, making sure you have the ability to create the content that you need, for example. The basic foundational technology is never going to go away. And so while tools may come and go or add-ons may make things better, so for example, some may argue the LXP, the learning experience platform, may replace the learning management system. Others will say, no, that's never going to happen, and the LXP may go away. We see it as kind of a blend of both the LMS and the LXP kind of starting to blend together into one ultimate solution. But at the end of the day, that LMS is always going to be a foundational aspect, we believe, to everything that our customers want to do. Anytime they want to track something, anytime they want to launch something, they really want to focus that in that environment. So investing in that and making sure that there is a good foundation in place for that is important. Secondly, the authoring side of it, making sure that the internal avenue to creating content and having that available to the organization is important as well. So when you think about investing in your own technology ecosystem, make sure you have that foundation and define what that is for you. It's going to be maybe a little bit different for everybody. For us, it's LMS and authoring. For other organizations, there may be other things that are really requirements for them, and they need to make sure that that's available. From there, once we had that foundation set, we moved into more of the aspirational, more of the trend building types of technology additions into that platform. And that fell into video-based practice and coaching, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Virtual reality, obviously VR, AR, other components that are really driving immersive learning experiences, and gamification. Gaming is, I mean, if we think about gaming, we know gaming is a hot trend and everybody's doing it. In the learning world, we call it gamification. Whatever that means, some level of experience in gamification coming through into that learning and training environment is another key aspect of what we looked at. And so when we broke down where should we be investing our money as we build out our vision of the next generation of technology, it was around skill building. Anything that was helping individuals build on their skills, that was a really key component to us as we assessed different technologies. Immersion and immersive technologies, VR obviously comes into play there, and anything that gave an individual an experience, the opportunity to experience that learning. We wanted to move away from the static, more traditional static types of environments and move more into the interactive, immersive, and experiential type of environment. So that's where we've spent a lot of our time and effort. So with that said, that gives you a great background in terms of how we have worked with thousands of our customers to help them start to move into this idea of what does that next generation look like, starting with people, building a foundation, and then adding the ancillary technologies as trends start to drive that. And so we want to spend time today diving into 3 key technologies that we found really interesting to support that vision for us, share those with you, answer questions about that as well, and then also come back and kind of bring that all together. But we wanted to start with the base of the conversation and then move more into the technology and the product side. So to do that, we'll start by talking a little bit about why video-based practice and coaching really started to drive interest to us. ELB Learning acquired Rehearsal earlier this year. There were a handful of things, but all driven around what we saw down here as being skill building opportunities. We saw video-based practice allowing individuals to work on their skills, But bigger than that, we saw rehearsal and the idea of AI coaching as being a great scalable option for individuals to get AI-driven feedback. So obviously AI is something that we're assessing on every type of technology that we look for. And this is one example where it really came to light for us, not only from a skill building perspective, but allowing AI to help that individual almost self-assess and critique their performance. So let's take a look at all that we want to kind of talk about with video-based practice and AI coaching. So at a very high level, for those that aren't familiar with this concept, individuals through this concept are able to receive a scenario. They're put in a position to actually work on a skill. They're able to utilize whatever device they want and grab that camera and that microphone and actually work on that particular skill, anything from a conversation to a show and tell. And that system allows them to practice as many times as they want to, going through an iterative work on that particular skill building. And then when they're ready and they feel comfortable with what they've done, they can submit that response. The system can then go through an AI audit of that response and actually provide them AI-based coaching and direction on their performance. So in effect, again, leaning on the concept of video, skill building, and AI all comes together in one solution, which made it super attractive for our learning ecosystem as we started to build that out. Benefits there: user-generated content, video-based, again, experience the environment, and lastly, AI-driven. So let's take a look real quick at what this looks like in practice. And so when I give presentations, I like not only to talk about all the things that are going on in our heads and what we look at and why we look at them, but I also like to get involved with showing you what this plays out like and what this looks like, really, so you can start to peel that back and say, hey, is this something that we want to look at? And it doesn't have to be with this tool, it can be with any solution, but do we want to look at video-based practice and AI coaching as a way to engage our audience as well? And the only way to really get to that point is to see it. So for a couple minutes, let's take a look at what that looks like in this world. I'm going to go ahead and take myself off video because I'm going to come in video over here. And here is the screen that we'll go through. So again, as I mentioned, with video-based practice, an individual is presented a scenario, and that scenario can be whatever you might want it to be. Some call centers might use this when a caller comes in and asks about a specific topic, for example. Sales obviously might use this when they're having individuals practice their sales presentations, like we'll do here in this elevator pitch. Leadership training might include this as you're having difficult conversations with employees. Maybe a rebrand might require your whole organization to learn how to speak about a specific rebrand, for example. Those are examples of how you might use this technology, but ultimately, we're now positioned with this scenario, and I'll hit play to let us listen to that.
Listen, I'm really interested in hearing about your company, but I've got a meeting in like 2 minutes. Can you give me just a quick 30-second overview of what you have to offer, and then we can set up a time later down the road so that I can learn more?
Great. I'm presented with an opportunity, and now I need to work on that skill. In addition to that video, there's extra content that I can consume in my preparation for that. But as soon as I'm ready and I want to begin, I grab whatever device I'm comfortable in using. I hit the record button. It activates my camera and my microphone, and now you'll see me back live and in person in front of this camera. Now, again, a couple key things. One, this is a very safe place for me to work on my skill building. Nobody's looking over my shoulder. I'm in the comfort of my own home office. I click the start recording button. I get a 3, 2, 1 countdown. And then I'm on the stage and I can begin to tell my elevator pitch. I can say, Rehearsal is a video-based practice and coaching platform that allows individuals to improve their skills. And I can talk for as long as I might want to. And when I'm done, I'll stop the recording. And then I'm on the stage and I can begin to tell my, and it plays back for me, and I get to do an audit of how I handled that particular conversation. So again, taking it from a static learning where I just watch something or consume something, I'm actually now experiencing this. I get to work on it, and then I get to critique my performance. And then I can make a basic decision. Did I do a good job? If so, I can submit that recording. Or maybe I don't feel comfortable with that initial recording. And on average, what we have found with a tool like Rehearsal is individuals actually discard recording 5.6 times before they actually submit that recording. They go through an iteration on their own. We utilize behavioral science here to say, hey, we just want the individual to work on this skill, but they're not going to submit that recording until they feel comfortable with what they just said, which means that they're working on that skill on their own time without anybody needing to get involved with that process. But let's say that I'm happy with this performance. I click submit recording. When I do that, it says, are you sure you want to submit this for review? When I click OK, that video now uploads into the platform. As it's doing that, we've got some extra things that are happening here. One, that audio file is being transcribed into video. From the L&D perspective, we have specifically stated that in this particular response, we want this individual to say at least 5 key words that we need them to say to feel comfortable that they know what they're doing in this response. Now, I purposefully only said 4. I said skill, coaching, practice, and rehearsal. I did not use the word technology, but the system needed me to say all 5, so they're requiring me to keep working on this skill. Now I can view my transcript. So here's where kind of text analysis and AI comes in a little bit. We break down that audio file and we assess that audio file looking for some of those keywords. But again, I consumed some content to learn how to tell a good elevator pitch. I practiced it. I didn't do it exactly as I needed to. So now the system can adapt. It can learn and say, because Jeff didn't get them all right, he can move on to a learning module. Now, if I would have said all 5 of those keywords, I could have moved right into the next activity. But I need this adaptive and personalized journey, need to take on some additional content. So I can go view a learning module. This might be an e-learning course. It might be a video file. Again, we utilize this adaptive concept to actually bring individuals some additional remedial training content. But once I review that, I can return to the scenario and I can actually try it again. So I've practiced, failed, or learned, however you want to define that, got some content, and now I can practice again by hitting the record button, and you get the idea. When I click start recording, I get the same 3, 2, 1 countdown, and I'll say rehearsal is a video-based practice and coaching platform that allows individuals to improve their skills using modern technology. I'll click stop recording, and I'll say rehearsal is a video-based practice. I'll stop, submit that recording, I'll click OK. Now again, that video gets assessed. So here again, just a reminder, we're really focusing our investment in this space around AI, around scalability, around adaptation of the learning experience. And now I did say all 5 keywords. So in this case, the system is going to say, okay, great. By doing that, you have confirmed that you know what you're talking about. You know, maybe 2 years ago, this might have been a multiple choice test. Take the multiple choice test and get an 80%, and now you know what you're talking about. Here, it's say these 5 words, and then we feel comfortable to let you continue. I then move to grade my response. I say how comfortable I felt. I can kind of grade, did I keep it under 60 seconds? Did I use the word technology? Maybe I didn't feel so comfortable or confident in my response. I can uncheck that, and then I click submit, and I've actually graded out or scored myself on that. And then when I go back, I have basically completed that particular activity. It is now done, and I can move on with my day. So again, the idea here is to reinforce skills that are learned in that learning experience utilizing technology. That's an example of what drove us to interest in a technology like this and how it may have some value into what you're trying to build out in your world as well. I'm going to come back from that video now, and you'll see me here live and in person back into the system, and we'll move on from here. So again, video-based practice and coaching was one key aspect of that. The next phase of where we spent our money was in virtual reality. Now, before I move to that real quick, I just want to open it up during this transition. Any questions, David or group, that need to be answered that are outstanding that we want to tackle before we move into that investment in virtual reality?
Sure, a couple quick ones here. So in the video rehearsal, you have the ability to try and try again, which I think obviously is the inherent value of the tool, right? It's about practice. But the question was then, is there a way to limit the preparation so that there's more of a on the spot presentation type, because eventually in the real world that's what they're dealing with. So Claudia was just wondering if there's sort of a real world prep limit on it.
Yeah, there are 2 options, and David, you hit the nail on the head. Part of the value, or the big value in rehearsal, is this repetition, right? There's value in that. But we do have another option, which is called the hot seat, and it is a one and done opportunity. The hot seat can be used whenever an organization wants to use that. So you may give it the opportunity for somebody to practice as much as they want, but before they're certified or validated to go out to the field, they have to complete a hot seat on that topic. And that basically means they get one chance to watch the video and they get one chance to respond, and they can't disclose discard a bad recording, that becomes their submission. So while L&D people love that the first time ever, yeah, we can see how people really come across. Sometimes at the end user side, they get a little nervous, but that is an option, and in effect, it's another way to kind of test somebody through that process.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of questions that are centered around the AI, I think, of the tool, and around, it's about the assessment, right? So what if it's not based on keywords, but like it's different things, like the choice to ask a certain question, or the needs to talk with the customer about features, things like that. I'm guessing that's something that you work with the clients to sort of build into what are the parameters that you need to use.
Yeah, so the keywords is one big thing. And the one thing that I forgot to mention that I'll hit on while we're here is Rehearsal does have a full out AI report. Every time a submission is submitted to the platform, the AI is running behind the scenes to give a performance summary across 9 key conversational attributes. So it's looking for eye contact, articulation, and logic, for example. And it gives me instant feedback on that. I can actually map my expressions, my positive and negative facial expressions, or my pacing across that entire 2-minute response, for example. It can count and track filler words and give feedback on if I'm using too many filler words. And lastly, it can give me a relative comparison across those 9 key attributes about how I compare with everybody else in the organization that submitted something. So I know that I'm strong with my eye contact and tone, but I might be falling behind others on my storytelling. So I want to learn a little bit more about how I might become a better storyteller. So yes, the AI and the text analysis in keywords is one aspect. The other aspect is a full out sentiment analysis on every submission that comes in through the platform as well. So great question.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and some other sort of feature specific questions. I'm going to see if some folks from your team can answer that.
Sure, great.
So,
all right. Yep. Fantastic. Thanks for that, David. Well, now, without further ado, and appreciate everybody staying engaged and asking questions. Feel free to keep those coming. But what I want to talk about now is our investment in virtual reality. And again, as we look at trends, virtual reality is probably one of the most important of all of those. And 2 years ago, ELB Learning acquired Trivantis and their technology, Scenario VR. The founder, creator of that product is here with us, John Blackman, and I'm going to hand it over to John to take it from here.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And anyone that's worried about Jeff being good at storytelling has never heard Jeff's stories. No worries there at all. So another one of the areas that ELB Learning went all in on is virtual reality. So why did we go all in? Well, the market is expected to explode over the next 10 years. We're looking at a 20% compounded annual growth rate for all 10 years. It's just an astounding amount of growth in the industry. And when you think about virtual reality, many people think that growth is centered around the consumer side of VR. We're very familiar with gaming. We see the ads all the time. But the truth is that the consumer gaming is only about 1/3 of the market. Most of the market is focused on immersive in the enterprise. So PwC did a study, next slide there, in 2019. And they found at the time there were fewer than 500,000 jobs worldwide impacted directly by VR and or AR. That will change this decade entirely. So we're talking about as many as 23 million jobs set to be using AR and VR in one way or another by 2030. So there will be a huge impact, and all of this is going on. So what has been traditionally slowing investment in immersive training? So there's a lot of preconceived notions about immersive training. Most people imagine that creating immersive content is just too difficult or expensive, and likely because they've seen some really cool VR games, they think they're going to have to spend a lot of money and hire a programming staff and maybe even a 3D designer to design spaces and create content. And you can do things that way, but you don't have to. And then distribution of content, that's always a big question as well, because it's a very new medium. Am I going to have to buy VR headsets for my entire staff? How do you get that content out to people? Well, the reality is that the best VR training is based upon photorealistic images and videos generated by shooting with a consumer 360 camera. If you're going to put somebody and train them to be in a certain environment, put them in the environment. If you're going to be training them to work on a factory floor, have them be in the factory floor. If you're having them look at your office, film your office, absolutely. And headsets are simultaneously getting better and less expensive day by day. And you don't have to give everyone a headset right out of the gate to take advantage of immersive learning. Content can be delivered via the browser, mobile devices, and headsets. So, and finally, there's a tool on the market that's available right now that allows anyone to create immersive learning with ease, and that's Scenario VR. So Scenario VR is a SaaS-based virtual reality authoring tool created specifically for immersive learning. All of your 360 videos and images are arranged as scenes, and you use a familiar, almost PowerPoint-like interface to add interactive elements which allow you to create your experience. You can start with something as simple as a facility tour or maybe an introduction, and then take it as far as a drag and drop part assembly with 3D models, spatial sounds, and even motion patterns around the scene. And for that distribution, you have many choices. Scenario VR itself is built to host VR content, and so wherever the student logs in, be it on the web, on their mobile device, or on their headset, they can take the content and have their results tracked. And this is the key, as you can dip your toes into immersive learning by starting at any level you wish. If many of your users will not have access to a headset, that's fine. They can take the same content on the web. You can also publish the content off of Scenario VR and put it directly on your LMS or LXP. Scenario VR publishes a SCORM 1.2, SCORM 2004, CMI5, and XAPI, and each of these produces a zip file with the proper manifest in an entirely encapsulated format that has no need to call home. I mean, you can even publish to HTML5 and host it on your own website or run it from any web server. And finally, you can actually even create courses that utilize traditional authoring tools like Lectora, Storyline, or Captivate, and just have part of the course be an interactive 360 experience. So if you have a traditional course and you need to add a section that exercises a student's spatial awareness, you can mix in an immersive section in with your other content to really create a complete course. And what about tracking results? Well, in SCORM, you're normally just getting a score and a completion status. But with immersive content, there can be much more that you want to track. So any content published to Scenario VR is natively XAPI. So without any extra effort, you'll be able to track every interaction the user makes within your scenario. You can even create custom data points and track them in aggregate across all of your learners. So if you have your own LRS, you can even report automatically all of your rich XAPI data to that system as you wish. All right, so given all that, let's take a look at Scenario VR and see what it looks like. All right, so we're going to change presenter to me. Okay. All right, so this is the interface for Scenario VR. This is the editor dashboard interface, if you will. On here, I have all of the items that I am the author of that I have created, and we're gonna look at this one right here. This is a quick factory floor kind of scenario in which you're reacting to an alarm going off on the factory floor. In a traditional piece of e-learning, to learn how to handle this alarm, you'd probably get a piece of paper with a list of steps on it that says, if this alarm goes off, do this, do this, do this, and set it to this temperature to fix it, and then you're done. And you'd probably remember that for about 20 seconds, and then you'd move on to the next thing, and that would be it. In an immersive context, that same thing is handled by actually responding to the alarm. So I can look at it in a full 360 on the web as it is, and I can handle it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this very quickly, just spend a minute running it, and then I will go in and we will look at how we created it, what it took to create something like this. So I put it into preview mode. I am now looking around the factory floor, and alarm goes off. It's a spatial sound. It's very loud. And so I go quickly climb up the ladder to react to this. When I go up there, the alarm is still going up. I have a timer. I have 30 seconds to solve this problem. So try something. That's wrong. What I should do is clear the alarm. So now I've cleared the alarm. Okay, great, but my timer is still cutting down. I have to solve this in 30 seconds. So I quickly look, and boy, that temperature looks really off. I'm looking at the panel. I would say the temperature is incorrect. Okay, great, but now I've got 9 seconds left. What should it be set to? Got to go in and set it. Yep, I do it. I can set it using the controls on the panel, and now it allows me to step down. Now that I've answered it correctly, I can step down and continue touring the facility, and it lets me exit here. It's just one quick example. What you'll see here is the failure message. This is what would have come up if the timer ran out. It would have told me I failed, the entire batch was ruined. What am I going to do now? So what did we do to create that scenario? Well, first I went in with a 360 camera, in this case used a GoPro Max, and filmed the environment. So I created a 360 of the environment so the user was able to look around and interact with everything that's on there. I filmed both video and images, but it I turned out just using the images. You could use either, obviously. The video in this case didn't really add anything to it. I tried it with some people walking through and doing different things, but it worked fine with just the images, so I ended up using just that. The next thing I needed was an alarm to go off. I actually had talked to a man who worked there, and he explained that that is something that happened. Of course, I didn't film that, so I needed to simulate it. So we needed an alarm to go off. So I found an MP3 file, just an MP3 file. But most importantly, I marked it as spatial, which means it's going to come from somewhere. So if I'm wearing a headset, or even playing it on my laptop here, it comes from one side or the other. And as I turn, I can actually hear that sound turn across. That's a spatial sound. So how do we mark it as spatial, but how do we determine where it comes from? Well, it's just based upon placement. So it's placed here, so it emanates from this area in the sphere. If I wanted that sound to come from this drum, just pick it up and I put it right there, and now that sound comes from there. So wherever I place it, that's where the sound comes from. It's just as simple as picking up and moving it, and you can move it anywhere you want on the sphere. The other thing I had is I had to kick off that sound and show something. So I had timed actions down here. I have a set of timed actions. And that first timed action just goes through and plays the alarm, shows the red light, and shows that climb up the ladder. I did it at 3 seconds. It could have been done at any time. Very simple. And then I just have a series of actions which animate the blinking of light. That's how I got that blinking light going. I animate it to get it to blink. We then had our hotspot here. Hotspot is just an image, could be an image or a 3D model, and an action associated with it, one or more actions associated with it. In this case, it's a very simple action. When they click that, it would bring them to the next scene, that panel scene. You visually select which scene you're going to go to. But we could have done anything here, and this is the key and the power. You have a complete palette of actions available to you anywhere you are in here on any trigger within the system. So I could link to another scene, play or pause the current scene, actually jump around on the scene time to create, go to different video elements or create loops. I can interact with other objects, so I can show things, hide things, animate them, stop animating. I can actually even pan the camera around, so I can spin the camera to different things in the scene. I can work with MP3 audio or 2D MP4 video, so you can imagine you could have something like a mentor come in and explain to you, hey, you shouldn't click on that, or you shouldn't do this. You can have mentors pop up. You can have TVs turn on in the scene if you want, things like that. So I can play, pause, stop, or set the time on all of those. We also have the concept of variables. So if you've ever used another authoring tool, the entire concept of variables, you can create variables, set them. They can be either numbers or strings. You can conditionally act upon those and branch at any time. We also, since we are SCORM Next API, we have the concept of completion and score in there as well. And if you're going to be publishing purely to the web, you can link to other websites or have attachments in there as well. So you can do all of that at any time, as well as have conditions attached to them. So you can attach one or more conditions on anything in there. You can test to see if you've been places, answered questions correctly, clicked on hotspots, or you can test any of the variables you created. And you can do those as either and or conditions. So you imagine you can gamify this in any way you want. That brought us to our next scene. On that scene, we were in a close-up of the panel, so we were looking directly at the panel. We were supposed to understand what was going on there with the panel. We had our timer in here as well, and we had a question. The question is very simple, question text. Each choice gets some text. You mark what is correct, and then you do actions based upon it. In this case, once the first question came up, we wanted to chain to the next question. So when they get it right, we played a little ding sound. We hid this question, and we showed the next question. That's how we chained them together. On here, we also had a timer, which shows us a few things. One, it shows a timer that you can set a timer and do something when the timer is done. It's also an example of a fixed object. So that's kind of a heads-up display. No matter where we spin, you'll see that it is on screen at all times. And so this kind of gives you a heads-up display. Same thing in the headset. As you turn your head, it will always be fixed in your display. Lastly, we went down to the final, and it's when we ran out of time or we finished things, and we had either a failed layer, which is that failed message and allowed us to restart. We were going to cause somebody to keep going through it until they got it right, or we got the exit button. And that was done through setting some properties on the scene. On the scene, we had on show and on done as well, but on the on show, we were going to show the failed layer if the timer went to 0, or we show the exit if the timer was not 0. And that's how we flip between those two things. So no code, Nothing to do in there, very simple to follow. You just have your actions together, timed actions and videos. Actually very simple to work with. And so from that, we've created a much more rich experience, a better way to learn how to handle that situation in there, because it put you inside of that situation and you had to deal with it while you were there. Okay, if anyone has any questions on that, I would be happy to answer any questions on there. David, did we get any questions come through on the VR portion?
Is it XAPI compatible? I don't know if you brought that up because you were wondering what the export format is, or are you restricted to using inside the scenario VR LMS?
Absolutely. So you can publish out to SCORM or XAPI or CMI5, and you can put it on there, and it will report all of the information over to your LMS/LRS.
Okay. Yeah, that was the main question. I think other ones just sort of, is there a differentiator between, so like Microsoft HoloLens and guides, or are those more like, equipment versus software,
Sure. So HoloLens is an example of AR, augmented reality. So this is pure virtual reality. It replaces what you see. With HoloLens, you would be able to see your environment and replace things over top of them. But as far as headsets, no, we work on all the major headsets. We have apps on 11 different headsets right now, and they're actually on the store. You can go to the store to your headset and download it on there. But then, and we're working on new headsets all the time. In the next few weeks, we should have yet another headset app come out as well.
Great, John. I'm going to go ahead and jump in here, just keeping an eye on time with 15 minutes left. Appreciate that kind of backstory on the virtual reality side of things. And so again, as you can imagine, when we look at the future of that learning ecosystem, most organizations are asking or exploring or trying to figure out how they get more immersive aspects into what they're doing. VR always comes to the forefront, and that's why I wanted John to talk about scenario VR. Another thing that we're hearing quite often, and it's really of interest to us because it changes in the framework around how people validate their learning, knowledge retention, all of those things, is all around gaming and gamification. The statistics about the number of gamers in the world is quite unbelievable in my mind, and I'm going to hand it over to one of the foremost experts. I used to play my Atari 2600 all the time, Stephen Bayer, but now you can talk about gamification and learning. Take it over.
Well, we have moved on from the 1970s, and
well, 80s. Come on, give me a little break. 80s, maybe. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we're gonna talk through gamification. Let's keep rocking and rolling. We're gonna talk a little bit about a product that we have called the Training Arcade, and we'll talk about not just the Training Arcade. We're gonna talk about the space overall, but just a few quick things on the Training Arcade. It includes 10 games. We have the only official rights to Jeopardy and to Wheel of Fortune. In this, you can build any game you want, and that's from those types of games to endless jumpers to match 3 games to deep scenario immersion games. All of them really can be built in under an hour, most of them under a half hour, and they could all be published to any LMS, any authoring tool. We have an arcade which we're going to go through. So let's get going. We'll dig in. Jeff kind of alluded. The reality is that there are 3.3 billion gamers in the world, so nearly half of the world's population states that they play games, and not terribly surprising because we live in a gamified world, right? If you're on your Peloton, you're looking at your leaderboard. If you're at Starbucks, you're probably using your rewards, or if you're driving a Prius, you might be looking at the dashboard and looking and seeing how you're performing. The games provide truly a safe place to fail, to learn, and to try again. And so I use this image here all the time because if you put your hand on a stove and you really burn it, you probably won't do that a second time. And that's what games do. They teach you things in a safe environment, hopefully one that won't actually burn you, but really give you an opportunity to learn and work much better in the field. And the last thing is they provide a social opportunity. They provide an opportunity for us to collaborate, to compete, and to really engage with our colleagues, which God knows over the last few years, everyone needs more than ever. Okay, so a few things I wanted to just kind of point out. There are so many different types of games out there, from casual puzzles to strategy games to role-playing games, survival games. There's lots of different game types. But we go past this slide here and we go to the next one and look at what is relevant for training. One of the things is, and I wouldn't just say it's these 6 types because there are lots of different types, but we always start by saying, what is the right type of game for my performance objective? Do I want someone to recall something or categorize something, visualize something, articulate something? Do I want them to be decoding things or be able to have better emphasis skills? The reality is that There's lots of different games, and we can look at all of those to try to figure out what will help us accomplish that performance goal in the field. Okay. One thing I know this is kind of a cliche, but I say this all the time. Training, in my mind, is the jelly to the really the really important content that is the peanut butter and the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You're going to get lots of rich content, lots of really important information with that peanut butter, but games are going to help it stick. And we have lots of stats that talk to that. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Okay. One thing that I wanted to bring up, and we'll kind of talk briefly about this product, the Training Arcade. The Training Arcade includes 10 different game types. It has 5 different question types. It's available in 17 languages. It has easy SSO integration, endless registration fields. So whatever you want to know about the person, you can know about the person. You can certainly limit the number of questions. You can limit the game time. You can limit the number of sessions, or you can let them play as much as they want. Spoiler alert. We see that a lot of people will come back and play our games over and over and over again. And that's, I think, one of the things we all want, right? We all want people to be digesting, engaging, and improving with our content as much as possible. So I often suggest that people don't turn that on, right? You can obviously track whether people are passing, failing. You can do, leaderboards, you can do points, you can do lots of different stuff. But I wanted to go, from that last slide, which is games, and then go into this, which is gamification. Gamification is a slightly different thing. It's about taking those individual game mechanics, if you will, and applying them to really real world things, right? So how do we hopefully gamify our training overall? How do we make sure that we get people to digest more content? How do we get them to share their points of views? How do we get them to come back over and over again? How do we get them to collaborate and compete with each other? So whether you're having people, do it on their own, or having people go head to head, or having people doing it as teams, whether we're setting up all of our content in the form of missions or learning journeys, we're going to go through all this in the actual product itself. Okay. One of the reasons that games and gamification is really important is that we are all motivated by different things. And I think as trainers, it's really important that we think about what motivates our learners, right? So I break them into these 4 different groups. You have your achievers, your explorers, fighters, socializers, and fighters. And kind of let's just break those down a little bit. So your achievers, those are people who want to collect things, or they want to really become experts. They want to master a skill. Your explorers, they just want to solve different things. They want to discover different things. Socializers are the people who want to be able to coach others. They want to feel useful. They want to be loved and recognized by others. And then they're the fighters, so they just want to win, no matter what, either fair or maybe not fair, but that's what they want. Okay, let's keep going. I wanted to just quickly get back to the data really quickly before I do a product demo. We did a study across 2,500 games, and we looked, and this is across all different subscribers of the platform. It was about 350,000 learners, and we saw that on average it was about 140 learners per game. The average game was about a little over 3, just short of 4 minutes, if you will. And we saw 2 stats that I think are really important. So the first stat is that 57% of learners came and they played 3 or more times. And I kind of joke about this sometimes, but how often is it that our learners come to us and say, I want to take your training 3 times? It's pretty rare. But games give us that opportunity, right? We're meeting learners where they are, right? But as a result of that, from the first play to the third play, we saw a 58% improvement. Now remember, this was a gameplay that was under 4 minutes. So in just under 12 minutes, we saw 58% improvement in knowledge. And why is that? Because 1, we are giving them an opportunity to try something, we're teaching them something, and we're allowing them another try. And then, if they don't get it right, we're teaching them again, and we're reinforcing it, and we're giving them another try. The more that we reinforce the point, hopefully the quicker they're going to get it. And it only takes 2 or 3 times for people to understand this stuff. So, okay, let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen, and we're gonna do a quick demo of the training arcade itself. So, hopefully you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can, Stephen. That's great. And just a quick warning on time. We've got about 5 minutes before we wrap up with one final key results slide.
Okay, so we will do this in 3 minutes or less. Arcades. What is arcades? Arcades allows you to take all of your games and all of your content and create a fun center for your learning management system, if you will. It plugs into any LMS. This whole thing can be SCORM wrapped and plugged anywhere you want. So what does it include? It includes a variety of learning journeys. Within each of these learning journeys, if you will, there are individual little missions, and the missions might include PDFs or web links or games or videos, but things that you want people to digest, right? You also can have different games that people can come in. They can play solo mode, or they can challenge somebody in the arcade. You also can have someone come in and play as part of a team. You're getting points for every single thing you're doing, whether it is playing games, watching videos, doing tasks, and so on and so forth. You're also collecting achievements along the way. You have leaderboard status. You have prizes that you can unlock. And by the way, if you ever want to set up an arcade, you can do so in just about an hour. It doesn't take very long. This whole thing is very turnkey. We wanted to make sure that it was a good user experience that could either easily be rebranded with any brand and with any content. You can jump right in. You can upload your content in. So if you want to create a journey, you literally just upload the information in. You create the different image, and then so on and so forth. Different activities, you can create those as well. Missions, prizes, you just pop them in. Let me just pop that out. And you can also change the themes and look and feel of the whole thing very, very quickly. Also has incredibly deep analytics. Tells you not only all the performance of the player, certainly what they know, how much they're playing, where their knowledge gaps are, but also starts to give you persona information on the player as well. And so, you know, one of the themes I think you'll see across all three of these products, let me stop sharing, is I think one of the things that's really important, whether you're talking about rehearsal, you're talking about scenario VR, you're talking about the training arcade, is we take data analytics very seriously. The more that we know about our learner, the more that we can really make some actionable changes and make sure that we're helping those learners perform better in the field.
Impressive time performance, Stephen, and thanks for that. And again, yeah, kind of echoing the idea there, you know, as we looked at the trends from a gaming perspective and just the knowledge that not only is it so ubiquitous worldwide today, but the trend of the younger generations coming through have grown up with games and gamification really throughout their education, but throughout their personal lives as well. And so finding ways to make sure that that's a part of onboarding programs and getting involved with new organizations and things like that has become something our customers have been really excited about. So again, when we think about building our technology ecosystem, we invested our time and effort into making sure we had that type of solution available. So thanks for your time on that, Stephen, really appreciate that. And as we wrap up in our final, let's see here, a few minutes of this particular session today, I'll kind of bring us home by just looking at kind of the 4 key things to consider around the next generation of learning technology ecosystems. And again, this is coming to you based on our experiences and what we feel. And everybody's going to look at this a little differently, but let's take a look at those key things to consider. And the first one for us is the people aspect of it. Before you even get to this point of really locking down, what does your technology process look like? Do you have the people, and do you have a path to the people that can ensure your success? Ensure access to those resources, find the pool and the network and the talent before you need them. Because what we're finding our customers struggling to do right now is they need to grow and they need to bring in this person to do that and this person to do that. And it's too difficult right now to find those folks. And so there's lots of resources out there to go to find those folks. Make sure you at least have a plan in place for that. You can have all the systems in the world and throw VR and games and video-based practice at things, but without people to get behind those and manage them, it really doesn't bring any value. So again, when we talk about technology ecosystem, don't forget the people. Technology or technical foundation for us, LMS authoring were the key investments, but for most organizations, that, you know, it'll be something like that. But again, from a people perspective, look at it as LMS authoring and outsourcing, or people, or what have you. Find a way that all of those work together. If you have that base, if you have a structure in place, when you need to pull the different levers, they'll be there and available to support what you're trying to accomplish. So learner access to resources from any device at any time, or even better, at the right time. Those are what we consider the foundational aspects and what we're trying to put together. So when our customers come to us and say, hey, get this in place for us, It's right stuff, right time in front of the individual, built around that foundation. All around the user experience. One of the things that we're seeing more and more now is a focus on that learning experience to be more on the learner themselves and the user versus the admin. 5 years ago, can the system give me this data? Can it make it easy to create content as an administrator? Throw that out the window kind of nowadays and say, does this make the learner want to get involved in it? Does it serve up a great user experience that they're used to and experiencing now with all that they do? And lastly, emerging trends. Start to look on and lean into emerging trends that support engagement. Video, VR, AI, gaming and gamification, mobile, those things that engage users, lean into those things, find ways to augment that user experience and that technical foundation that you have. And with 10 seconds to spare, we are now open for Q&A. We've hopefully been answering your questions along the way. And I hope this was valuable in terms of just another way to look at what everything's going on out there in the field. Feel free to add questions. We'll stick around a little bit over the next few minutes to answer those. But again, always feel free to reach out to ELB if we can help. Happy to do so. Just answer questions post this session. David, anything you want to close with?
Yeah, a lot of the questions you guys did a great job of answering them in line, as we were going through, because there were a lot of really feature specific questions. So I appreciate everyone jumping in there and answering people's questions. We would have never made it through otherwise. I appreciate that. Just looking for anything that wasn't answered in there. I think you mentioned some data that you've done collected internally, I think from the games in the last section there. And I was just wondering, is that a published study, or is that just the data that you're sharing that you've collected internally?
It is a published study. We can put a link into the chat for anyone to see, or you could go to thetrainingarcade.com and it's under the resource section. But
And the other thing, Stephen, just to note for everybody here, we will send a follow-up with access to kind of all the different links that we talked about today, just so you have access to them as a follow-up. So we can include that with that email as well.
Great. But beyond that, I think what it is like I said, the team was able to answer most of the questions in line in the question box, folks. That link is now in the chat for everyone, so the entire audience should be able to see that, and you can click on that link for that study. Obviously, my colleagues here will have these questions as well after the webinar. They'll get a report with all the questions, and so they'll try to, if there's any follow-up that needs to be done, they'll do. But I see that it looks like you guys managed to get onto every single question, so we appreciate that. Obviously, appreciate everyone's time today, and ELB Learning for sponsoring the hour and providing your time to us. I mean, that was invaluable. So I really appreciate you guys walking through, and it just gives you a sense, how complex a modern learning technology ecosystem can be, all the different moving parts. It's not one simple formula for every organization, a lot of different moving parts, and this just sort of demonstrates that we probably could have done 3 hours easy and covered a lot of other ground. So I just appreciate everyone's attention and engagement. And again, thanks to ELB Learning for sponsoring the webinar today.
You got it, David and team. Thanks so much. Appreciate everyone's time. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.